Hey everyone, we're gonna do some graphing with rational functions today, and think of it in terms of the graphing project that we're working on. And the part I want to do today is the chin. So we're gonna try to do Olive Hobbs' chin right here. In the past, I've done so rational functions are pretty powerful. You can do stuff that gets flat and then goes vertical. So I've done before Calvin's kind of line where his forehead and hair meet. Use that with a rational function. But you can do a lot of other stuff. So we're going to also focus kind of here on the chin that we have for Hobbs. So the first thing I'm going to look at is kind of this slanty line right here and how I can get it to go up toward an asymptote that's over there. So I'm going to put in first kind of experiment with the line that I want. So we'll say y is maybe 0.4x. And you can adjust that, right? If you want, you could say 0.3, right? That's maybe a little too shallow. 0.5 is maybe a little too steep. So I'm going to go with 0.4. That looks like pretty close to parallel to the bottom of his chin there. And then I'm just going to leave that for now. We'll shift stuff around in a minute. So that 0.4 x, and then I'm going to throw in also for this minus h and plus k. We'll add a couple of sliders. All right, so add those. So I'll move those back to 0 to start. And this is kind of how I'm going to start is basically just looking at this line that's right here, right? We're also going to want an asymptote to go through here. So in addition to that, I'm also going to add, let's say, just 1 over x, right? And let's go ahead and recopy this part of this line. All right, and let's change some colors. So maybe we'll make this purple and dotted since that's our guideline. And then maybe this blue line here, we'll just make that a little bit thicker, say 3. So that's my line right now. I can go ahead and throw in another point, right, the HK, so H comma K. There's my point. Right now it's red. I'm going to change that again to purple. And this I can drag, right, and it'll drag around my my graph. I also want, let's put in 1 over x minus h, because right now the vertical asymptote, right, that's going through there, and we can even add that as a guide. Let's say we got x minus h, or x equals h, right, is our vertical asymptote. And we'll just make all the asymptotes purple and dotted. So that is the asymptote, and now I can kind of drag around, right, this piece that I want to work with. So I'm thinking that'll look good like over here-ish by the chin, except I need it on top. I need this piece on top. So let's go ahead and throw in a negative, right? So maybe we'll make this a negative, right, 1, and that'll get it to go rather underneath the slanted asymptote. It'll be on top of the slanted asymptote. So remember, negatives are going to flip things upside down. So this negative that we're adding in, right, we're just going to now go on top instead of underneath. This may or may not, right, approximate this very well. So it's kind of close, but I need it a little bit sharper. So I can do that by making this maybe a value of c up here. And I'll add in a slider and then be able to adjust, right, kind of how sharp or how not sharp that's going to be, right? So I can sort of adjust that and also adjust where that's going to be located. So I'm going to, just for the sake of visibility, change this guy to maybe an orange, right? So you can kind of see it a little bit better, right? So I'm going to adjust that maybe to, let's put in a plus C and we'll make C negative. So maybe like a negative 0.4, 0.3, right? Somewhere in that vicinity, around there. And that asymptote, we can kind of move that around as well. We'll just leave it, let's say around like 0.56 for now. We may adjust that later, but that is that HK tells me where the vertical asymptote is, and also kind of has that guideline, this 0.4 x minus h plus k going through it. So that's that slant asymptote guideline. All right, so that is somewhat close, maybe not super close. It's definitely not getting this bump over here. So we'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit more. There is a great way with rational functions to add in just bumps at certain places, and that is, I'm going to go ahead and hide this one for a minute, and let's go and put in, maybe we'll still put it up here, so I'll drag that back down. That is with this type of function, y equals 1 over x squared plus 1. So this is what I call my single bump function that I can use with rational functions. And you can adjust this, right? So if I put in, say, maybe a b on top and a d next to the x squared on the bottom, those sliders, the b, the one on top, that is going to adjust, right, how high this goes. That's your stretching factor, right? So I'm just multiplying basically by this b, and that's going to let me stretch this up or down as much as I want. And then the d, right, this is going to make it either skinnier, right, so really skinnier, or a little bit wider, right? And generally we're not going to throw this into the negative, so this will probably be between 0 and, I don't know, maybe like 30. You can make it really skinny by getting really close to 30, or just making it wider, getting close to that 0 that's out there. If you actually do get 0, then it's just dividing by 1 and you just have that value b. So you do want a little bit there. So this will help us get this bump, and I'm just going to add this curve to my other curve. So I'm going to start putting in some names, right? So this is going to be what I call y1. That was kind of our basic function, that rational one, that orange one right there. We're going to call this one y2. All right, so this is our bump that we're putting in, and I'm just going to add y1 plus y2. Okay, so y1 plus y2. And let's go and make this, also make this one orange, so we can see it a little bit better while we're adjusting things. All right. So now, right, you can kind of tell, right, I have my old orange function, which was right here, but it's adding this new bump into it. And notice this, this bump is practically 0, right, as I go away from it, but very high. It's got a peak, and then practically 0. So what that does to your function is it essentially leaves it almost the same everywhere except for near that bump. And the skinnier you make that bump, right, the less it'll affect your other function. The wider you make it, the more it'll affect that other function. So I'm going to play around with some of these sliders. So that top value b, right, you don't want it quite that high. So I'm going to bring that down to we're about there, right where the corner of his mouth is going to end. And then we want it to affect this graph a little bit more than it is, so I'm going to make it a little bit wider by adjusting that d, right? So that d, if I make that a little bit skinnier, I'm going to try to get to just the top edge of the mouth right there, and then we could also adjust things for the bottom edge, right? So let's see. So there's that. I can also add in, right, if I think it's peaking in the wrong spot, I can shift it, right, by shifting the x, right? So we might do maybe like an X. I want to go left, so I'll put in a plus, maybe like 0.5, something like that. That was a little too far, right? So maybe that peaks a little bit too far than what I wanted, so maybe we'll bring it back like 0.3, maybe 0.2. And you can just adjust it till it looks right. So this looks pretty good. Again, I'm going to adjust that value of D just a little bit more. And depending on what you want, right, maybe that top value also needs to go up a little bit. So maybe instead of 2.2, we'll do 2.3. And that is looking, right, pretty good. So that's looking pretty good to me. We'll also need to worry about this part on the right, but so far that's looking pretty nice, modeling the shape of his mouth. So let's go ahead and add in maybe a third like bump function, right? So maybe a third peak that'll kind of go up here and then come back down again. See how that, if we can get it to kind of trace that little curve at the edge of his mouth right there. That's close to the asymptote. So we'll go ahead and add in a Y3, right? So before I do that, I'm gonna kind of adjust. These were pretty good, right? So this was 2.3 for the B, 0.6 for the D. And we can always adjust those a little bit more if we have to later. But I'm going to go ahead and take those out for now. And we're going to put in a Y3. So a Y3 is basically going to be kind of the same thing. I might even use B and D again. So B divided by that D times X. Again, here we may have to adjust it. So we'll probably want the bump somewhere close to this H value. So I'm just going to put in something for now, like maybe 5.5-ish. We don't want it exactly on that asymptote, which right now is the H of 5.6. So we don't want it maybe exactly on the 5.6. So I'll put it a little bit left of that. We got a square, and then our plus 1. Right, so plus 1. And we'll add our sliders, right, the B and the D. All right. So now this green one, here's my bump function, and I am definitely going to want to make that skinnier, so I'm going to go ahead and put that D up at 30, lower bound 0, we don't need that to be negative, and then the B, again I can just adjust this one to make it either taller or shorter, whichever one I'm looking at, so we'll just leave it there for now. This I'll call Y3, right? So I'll just type that 3 next to the Y and it automatically puts that subscript Y3. And now we can put plus Y3 and start adjusting things, right? So now that's what it looks like with that extra piece. So that's definitely affecting this left part of the graph more than I want. So I'm going to make that a much skinnier bump. All right, so we're going to go probably pretty high, maybe somewhere around here, like the 20s. It's looking good. We'll go maybe like 23. We'll leave it there for now. May adjust that in the future. And then B, right, the top peak value, we can either bring that up or down, see what that's going to do to that guy. All right, so right now, it's not affecting it a whole lot, so maybe I want to adjust this D. Maybe I need a little bit more width. I'll bring it back down a little bit, maybe somewhere around here, I don't know, 17-ish, and then start playing with it again. All right, so that B, again, I'm just looking to add in, we may have to adjust the where this goes a little bit as well, left and right. Alright, so a lot of adjustments that I can make right now aren't really doing a whole lot to get that bend, and that's probably because it's too close to the asymptote. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust that asymptote over just a little bit. Maybe, so if you want to see what the value is, you can look at the H that's right there. So maybe we'll go, I think we're at 5.6, maybe we'll go over to like 5.8. right? And then I can start to adjust that bump again. This K value, right? It will also move that slightly up to about 3.6. So now let's go ahead and play around with these guys. So that B value, right? As I adjust it now I can actually start to see that that bump affecting in here. If I make this wider, right, or skinnier, right, if I make it really skinny, I can even start to see that little peak that's right there, just affecting that little part of the graph. So I don't think we need to go that high. We could probably come down closer to the 20s and move that down so that little wiggle is a little bit less. So maybe somewhere down here, right, and maybe make it a little bit wider, taking that D value down, or maybe even a little bit up, right. I'll just keep modifying these just a little bit. Let's see, make that a little bit wider. We can go and then maybe a little bit less. So if I make it wider but shorter, I think that'll give us what we want. So maybe I'll come back to the 17 and then somewhere like right in there. So that is, I think, looking pretty good to me. We got the B is about 1.3, right? Hitting the top of that. And we got this guy, right, the D 17. So now I can start putting all that in. So that is overall, like I said, looking pretty good. Again, if you want just a little bit more, you can try to figure out, right, where things would look good, where they won't. You do want to make sure you put in your variables, right, all into one equation before you get to the end. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and see what I get. So we'll say y equals, right, that's 0.4, right, so this was my y1, 0.4 times x minus h. The h ended up at 5.8, right, so we can do a 5.8 on that one. X minus 5.8, right, squared. And then plus the k, which was 3.6. And then plus this c over x minus h. So the c, right, that was this negative 0.4. So we'll say minus 0.4 over the x minus h. So x minus h value 5.8. All right. Keep going. You can also, right, add, just highlight, copy and paste, right? So I can copy and paste that y2, right, that's in there, and then plus this y3. And again, y copy, and if you need to drag this menu, you can, right? So you can adjust that, and then make sure again, because we'll probably delete these fairly soon, that you put in some of those. So we'll put in, I'm just going to check 1.3. If we make that a little bit higher, maybe make this a little bit skinnier. I think we had it in a good spot. So make that a little bit lower, around the, yeah, 1.2, 1.3, right, depending on this guy. So we can even adjust that a little bit more. It's right there. So we'll say we'll leave that at like 13 for the D, and the B will be 1.3. All right. So once I get that, I should have all of, so that's quite the rational function, right? It may not look like our usual rational functions, that's just one fraction, but if you wanted to try to multiply this stuff out, get common denominators, combine all the pieces, you could make just one fraction out of it, but that's a little bit overkill. Having the separate fractions listed is just fine. And in fact, gives you a little more control over the behavior of that graph. Right? Um, there is, oh, I think this does not have a square. All right. So there we go. So there's that red graph that's right there. That should be the model. And then I can go back and kind of delete all the other stuff, right, that's in there. All the sliders I used, the Y1, Y2, the C value, right, and incorporate this into my new graph. I am going to restrict it, so we are going to start over here about negative, I think it was negative 0.2, somewhere like that, less than or equal to x, right? So again, you can kind of play with that. We'll zoom in and see, maybe you want to use negative 1.15, something like that, or even just 0.1, right? You can kind of play around with that, see what you want to use. I'll use 0.15. And then we want to go all the way over here, right, up to the top where we get to about x is 5.58. So we'll say, make that even wider. X has to be less than or equal to 5.58. And that will end that part of the graph, right? Once I got that down, then that is my function. I'll call it good. If you want to change the color, now's a good time. We'll make that black. And in another video where we talk about shading, I will kind of do the bottom piece as well. I'll probably have that pre-done, and then we'll just talk about shading in between those. So anyway, that will do it for this video, and we'll see you on the next one.